Good morning, everyone. My name is John Skees, and I'm the Director of Media for TAPS. I wanted to thank you for joining us today for our fall soccer preseason meeting. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes, but first I've got a few housekeeping items to address. So this webinar is being recorded. You're going to receive an email tomorrow with a link to that recording. We've got 2 other webinars today, so it's going to take a little bit longer to get the videos cut and processed and uploaded. So sorry about that. Second, if you have any questions while we go through the presentation, please use that questions feature on the GoToWebinar interface. We're going to try to answer those as best we can as we go. But if we don't get to yours right away, don't worry, there is a general Q&A at the end. So we will try to get to all of your questions. If email is easier for you, you can send any questions to info@taps.biz during the webinar. We're going to be keeping an eye on that inbox, and we will pass any questions on to our presenters. But if we don't get to your question today, or if it's just too specific to answer appropriately in this venue, please send us an email at info@taps.biz. Third, you're going to hear us reference some handouts today. If you look at the handout section to the GoToWebinar interface, you're going to see a few documents listed. You can check on those. Click on each one of those items, and it'll open in your browser, and you'll be able to download those. Joining us today from the TAPS office is Brian Bunselmeyer, TAPS Executive Director, Robert Huckabee, Associate Director and Director of Compliance, and Steve Prudhomme, TAPS Associate Director. We've also got Will Dixon in the office helping us out with the keyboard and video ads today. Before we get started, I've got a couple of poll questions to ask. So we'd like to know real quick, what is your school's TAPS classification? Okay, I'm going to close this poll, and we'd also like to know what your role is on your campus. And I'm going to close this poll and hand it to Brian.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us here today on the TAPS Fall Soccer webinar. Kind of give you a pacing situation here. We're going to talk about the general TAPS rules, a few NFHS rules, the dates, and then we're going to go into what happens with COVID-19 and how it may or may not disrupt our season, and the protocols for playing as safe and healthy as we can. I know there's a lot of questions on everybody's mind as school is starting up, so we appreciate you making time to join us. As well, we understand with the Big Ten and the Pac-12 and the Big 12 announcements recently, we do understand we are in very changing times. But as of this moment, at this day and time, we're planning to move forward with the calendar dates as they are shown. We're planning on hosting our championships, and we're looking forward to a great fall soccer season. As we go forward, I highly encourage you, this is your call, not ours, to ask questions as questions may come up. Use the questions function in the GoToWebinar, or if you're struggling there and it's easier for you to email us at info@taps.biz, info@taps.biz. Kelly and Rhonda will be watching that as well. So we've got John watching the webinar call. We got the ladies watching the email, and Robert, lead us off with important dates.
All right, Brian, thank you very much. Let's jump into some important dates coming up on the calendar. As we're all aware, the last few months we've been dealing with some changes, and we did make some modifications to the start of our fall season. And as we look at those dates that are coming up, remember, you're in summer rules. We had summer rules throughout the summer. You're in summer rules until you begin school. So if you haven't started school yet, you're still under summer rules. You have those 3 hours per day maximum contact with your students and a maximum of 15 hours per week. So those are our general summer rules, and that information is out there. If you need more detail, reach out to us if you need any assistance in that. Once you begin school from then until September 7th, our fall season isn't going to kick off for our fall activities officially until September 7th. So once you start school until September 7th, you're still under summer rules with regard to hours of contact. That's 3 hours per day maximum and 15 per week. But once you start school, you can make your workouts and your practices mandatory. That's the big difference between summer and then moving into the beginning of the school year. You can make those workouts mandatory. You can have tryouts if that applies to your particular situation. And remember, during that time, from when you start school until September 7th, no scrimmages, no games. And keep that in mind. If you have any questions, reach out to us. Brian?
So, Robert, as I'm sitting here thinking about it, Can I still create virtual workouts for my kids even if they're not with us? And what options are available as far as sending things to the emails or whatever to my kids?
Virtual workouts are allowed. Virtual workouts were allowed as we finished the spring, even though we were shut down from having games and actual events and championships. Virtual workouts are allowed. That's a part of what we do allow. So you could do that. If your kids are not available, cannot come to your campus, that is an option.
And I'm going to throw one more question out there that's come up to me recently. We have an open gym policy or an open weight room policy, and we'll get to those later. But for soccer, can the kids just come out and shoot on their own and dribble and use the grass and get in shape? No coaches or whatever. Is it okay to have an open field and give open access?
That would be allowed. That's up to your local control at your school. So as we move through the summer and move into the year, those kind of things with regard to allowing access to your facilities, stay within those restrictions. But if it's open for all, then that is available. Yes.
And I think the last comment I'd make there is all that needs to be in keeping with your school protocol. So if your school has a protocol or the church has a protocol or whoever you're leasing fields has a protocol that says they can't come, that of course would override what we just said. But according to TAPS rules, that open field opportunity to go out and run around or do whatever and shoot would be okay.
That is true. You've heard the word local control over the course of the spring and summer. You'll hear that a lot as we move into the fall. We are well aware that circumstances are different in our different communities for our member schools. So in those areas, we're allowing you to manage that as you need to in your local area. If we jump to the next screen, we're looking at important dates for the fall soccer 2020 season. Remember, September 7, that's that Monday, that's holiday, but if you want to start then, you're welcome to. That's the first official day for all of our fall activities. And then on September 10, for the world of fall soccer, you can begin your first scrimmages or game or tournament, whatever might apply to what you can schedule. So that's your first availability for scrimmages, games, or tournaments between other schools. And then as we move into October, at some point, we don't have a date yet, as we move close to the end of our fall soccer season, district certification is on October 29th. We will have a season ending webinar. We'll have a short webinar at that point to discuss wrapping up the season and then details you need to know for moving into the playoffs. November 6th, we'll have a championship webinar for those who have been in the past to our Final Four. You know, we have a Final Four coaches and AD conference call historically the last few years. We're going to move that to a webinar format, be able to disseminate some information to you and also allow you the opportunity to ask questions and get all the information you need about our championship. Those are scheduled for November the 11th through 13th, and we'll get to you with more information on the actual times and locations as we move through that process. We have all through the summer and now continue to reach out to our host facilities and understand what they're able to do and how they can assist us. We'll continue to do that. And as everybody knows, there are many unknowns right now. So we'll continue to manage that as best we can and get that information to you. And then the last date, November 16th, our all-state selection conference call that we hold every year. We're going to move to brackets now. Steve's going to visit with us a little bit about how and when you can expect the formation of the brackets.
Yeah, the release date for the brackets is September 15th. We're getting all our contracts in, our commitment. We've had some schools that are going to be telling us whether or not they can commit all the way. So again, we want to make sure that we know exactly who's going to be participating. We'll get the bracket together. And this year is a special year. We'll call it special because of COVID. And so please do not write this in stone when we put a bracket together. There may be changes. Anything's possible in 2020. And so again, hang with us, stay abreast of what's going on, and your bracket may or may not change due to the conditions that we're experiencing right now. So again, look for those brackets the second week of September, but also stay updated and pay attention to what comes out of this office if there is any changes. Now at this time, we're going to move over to another poll question, and John.
Yes, sir. Okay, folks, we would like to know a little bit about your experience. How many years have you coached at your present school? Leave this open for about 20 more seconds. Looks like more than half of you have voted. All right, I'm going to close this one. And I got one more question. How many years have you coached in TAPS, period? your school or any other school in TAPS? About half of you voted. I'll leave this open for a little bit longer. All right, I'm going to close this poll and hand it back to Steve and Robert.
All right, thank you, John. Okay, next we're going to talk about rules and governance. We're going to transition to, obviously we have the TAPS rules that apply to fall soccer, and we have the NFHS rules that we follow for fall soccer. So I'm going to pass it off to Brian.
So basically, to give you a basic recap, let's talk about who you can play. Fall soccer is a struggle. We know that because the UIL has not yet started playing. There are no other opponents other than TAPS and a few of the up here in the north, the TCAF schools. I know we're trying to play as well. So interscholastic competition is a scrimmage, a tournament, or a game, all contests in which you're playing against another school or school-based option. The game limitations on the next slide, it's important to realize here that local control dictates how many games you play in a week. So we have we have a COVID situation right now, but I know that weather could also come into play. So just understand that local control is going to dictate how many games you can play in a week. There is still a playoff warm-up game per round. And once you get there, and if we get there, and if we're able to carry that off, you'd still be able to play additional games there. So I don't think anybody's going to meet the max at 3 tournaments and 20 games this year, but that would be the other control. Eligible opponents has been a question that we've received for several years. So remember that you cannot play club teams, you cannot play independent teams, and school members of a non-approved league. If you have questions on that, or if the school is approved, please do us a favor and email us at info@taps.biz. You can play home school teams. You can play teams in another league, such as TCAF up here in the north, or school-based programs. So it is an opportunity. I think the big one, the question that we get every year is, can I play a club team? And the answer is no, you cannot play a club team. So Steve, tell us about the official ball.
Official ball at TAPS is the Wilson, the Forte. And this ball is required. Now you can practice with whatever ball you want to. We don't care if it's a tennis ball. But once you get out there on the pitch and you start to have your matches, whether they're tournaments, district, non-district, postseason that you are hosting, the ball is Wilson. So that'll carry through all the way to that last championship game. So make sure that you're following along with that.
Steve, just as a quick reminder there, with the COVID-19 situation, looking what the NFHS is kind of saying, probably need to have 6 balls that you can clean and sanitize, and it's going to be really important once you get there. So a lot of people have been trying to get by with 1 game ball. Make sure you have enough to keep the Wilson in play, and make sure they're in good shape when you do play with them.
Right. And we'll be visiting a little bit more about the COVID and what the expectation is with keeping the ball sanitized. Also, to find the official TAPS approved balls, if you have a question, you can go to taps.biz, look on TAPS approved balls, hit that, and it'll show. And if you go all the way down to the bottom, there's also a link there to the dealers, Wilson dealers inside the state of Texas. And so again, that's helpful information as you move forward. Moving on to the game information. Make sure that you share the information that is needed with the TAPS office, and you do that through Rank 1 and through ScoreStream. We need those schedules, the results, the scores. Make sure the reporting is done accurately and in a timely fashion. And if you have any issues or problems, you can reach out to the TAPS office, and namely Will, who's the person who's been trying to help. And Will will also be the person who may be calling upon you, asking you, where is a score, what we need, update, we need the standings. So it's very important that we get this information. Also, we're going to be talking about the officials in a moment. They need to have those schedules turned in, and they need to be updated. So when a change happens, a change needs to be made in all the appropriate areas.
So let's ask a quick question here, Robert. If you put your score in Rank 1, we say it's required and it's important. So putting your schedule in Rank 1, where does that show up, and how does that help our TAPS schools?
So if you don't have your schedule in Rank 1 and you don't make it public, then you don't appear in the standings, okay? You have to report your scores. So your schedule has to be in Rank 1. Your schedule has to be made public. You can certainly keep it private in the off season or preseason when you're formulating your schedule. But when that's good to go, you need to make that public. If you need any help with that, reach out to our office. Kelly and Rhonda in our office can help you. And then you need to be reporting your scores, because that's how everything is then pushed on into the standings reflecting your wins and losses. If your schedule's not in there in public, you won't show up in the standings, and if you don't report your scores, then that won't be reflected in the standings.
So especially in the state of Texas, when we're strung from Brownsville to Dallas-Fort Worth, probably not going to be able to just pick up a paper and see a fall soccer score. We need it there. We're also requiring Score Stream. We started this last year. So in Score Stream, when you report it, just understand that that goes to the Associated Press. They may or may not use it, but it goes there. It's also going to show up on the TAPS homepage, www.taps.biz, on that score ribbon, and it will also show up on the fall soccer and the soccer pages on that. So helping everybody to promote your kids, to promote your opportunities, to promote your teams. Rank 1 in Score Stream, report your scores, helps us a lot as we go through the season.
Yes, and it's important to go to both. If you do one, it's not necessarily going to populate the other. You must do Rank 1 and Score Stream. And finally, reminder that Wilson is the official ball. And again, they're our partners, and they do help us financially. And they also help us by providing the championship ball that you're going to play with at the very end of the year. And also it gives us uniformity that you're going to know what ball is going to be there when you play your games. And before this rule, there was all sorts of balls that were being used in different sports. I know what happened to me in basketball, where they pulled a ball out of a cardboard box before a game, said, we're home team, this is the ball, and there was no rule. So now I can at least expect what basketball is going to be used, what soccer ball is going to be used. And so again, we do appreciate that rule and having it in place, and Wilson's been a great partner. Moving on to officials. Now, again, TAPS has a requirement. You have to be a TAPS approved chapter, whether it's TASO or one that we specifically have gone through the process to be approved. You can find these on the website if you go under resources, under officials. And again, it's not good enough to say, hey, well, I'm TASO trained, or I was trained here. They need to be TASO trained, TASO member, TASO assigned, or a member of a TAPS approved chapter, all those three. So it's very important that that is done. Also, get contracts with these assigners and with these chapters. And we would love for you to be able to share those contracts with us, because again, we'll help enforce a contract. We do have the recommended pay scale. We expect the officials to follow that, and we expect our schools to follow that, and that's enforceable for us. So sometimes there's miscommunication or there's problems. TAPS can be there to be an advocate for whatever agreement was entered into by the two parties, and we'll be there to help make sure that's followed through on. So again, make sure you check your officials, make sure your chapter is appropriately done. And again, it needs to go through an approved chapter with an approved signer doing the scheduling, and keep your schedule updated and make sure you stay in contact with your officials chapter throughout the year. And again, they're great partners, and we would not have games without them. So be supportive of these guys and gals as we move forward. Brian?
A couple of things that come up this year with COVID, just to fill you in. TASO is looking at a reduction in almost all sports of available officials by 10 to 15%. So fall soccer, you should be the soccer that's out there. I don't know how much club is select is going on at that time, but do make sure you get with your signers, let them know what's going on, let them know your schedule changes ahead of time. I know weather does create some things when you're playing at a park and you don't necessarily own whether or not you can get on or not, but TASO has requested. They told us we do a good job as an organization about keeping their signers in the loop. We'd like to keep getting that same compliment when we go to the TASO soccer meetings.
All right, thank you, Brian. The other aspect of rules that apply to fall soccer are obviously the NFHS rules. NFHS.org is their main website. If you go to that website and click on soccer, it will take you to the soccer page, and that's a place where you can purchase the rule book. You can get a downloadable version. You can purchase the app that will have it and make it available on your phone. That's what we've done the last few years here in the TAPS office. We have all of those rule book apps on our phone. If we ever need anything when we're at an event or when somebody calls, we have that readily available. It's only $6 or $7. It's well worth the investment. Obviously, coaches always need to have a copy of the rule book with them. So that's an easy resource for that, the NFHS rules, nfhs.org, and they are available there for purchase. NFHS uniform rules and regulations, when it comes to our team sports, uniforms are always something that come into play with regard to what's allowed and what's not. We always caution people, don't listen to your Under Armour or Nike or Adidas rep in terms of what's permissible and what's allowed. by NFHS or TAPS rules. If you ever have any questions in that regard, reach out to us. We can help you walk through that process. There have been some changes this year, and at this point, Brian's just going to walk through some of the 2020 changes in soccer.
Before we get started, just as the option and to have the right uniform rest with you, not with us. Numbers on front and back, make sure your colors are right, make sure your socks are right, all those good things that seem little and trivial, but the official, the R1, generally spots that right away. And as the announcer, as we try to call a contest, if you're wearing a white number on a white shirt, it's really hard to try to figure that out. So we're not telling you to go buy grandiose uniforms this year. Budget may not allow, but do make sure, if you possible, to make sure your uniforms are in compliance. That's the number one complaint we get from officials. As we go forward, one of the things that has changed is the tucking in of the jerseys. I think most folks are going to be in agreement with this one, that a lot of the jerseys have changed. So I think it's a good, they do have to still cover the midriff and whatever, but at least they're not going to spend time telling somebody to tuck their shirt in. We're going to keep going forward from what I read there. The mouthpiece previously had to be a color so that they could tell you had it in. Now it can be white or whatever. Sounds trivial. From a trainer's aspect, though, it was always a lot easier if you weren't using a clear mouthpiece, that I would know what we were dealing with if you had a situation. As we go on to the next slide, the ball out of play, there's a lot of discussion about if it touches an official, remains on the field. There's some constructive changes there as far as the promising attack, if it goes into the goal, if it goes out. So make sure you get with your officials to make sure how that's going to happen and how that works for you this year. The drop ball, it's basically a strike in this area. They've added the new wording, so it just goes into what a drop ball will and will not occur and how it will. I thought the interesting point was that they changed the word must till shall. So players outside the penalty area, at least 10 yards, and shall remain there instead of must stay there. So it kind of caught me a little different as to what that was, why that changed, but they obviously felt like it was needed. And then the goalkeeper stopping or lunging forward is with both feet. So it seems to me, as long as you get that 1 foot on the line, you're pretty good to go. But again, make sure you follow up with your local TASO or TAPS approved chapter to make sure you're in compliance. Again, this is simply a clerical situation to make it easier for everybody to understand. And especially as we went through the opposing kicker in the penalty area, I think this cleans up. There are 2 or 3 different rules, and they now are all going to be pretty much the same. So I won't read those to you, but you can go back through and find those when you go forward. So.
All right, thank you, Brian. Remember, if you need rules assistance, the TAPS rules with regard to soccer are in section 170, and then the NFHS rules are available as well. All right, we're going to shift gears and talk about eligibility, staff eligibility, and student eligibility. Rank 1, remember, we started last year, is our database for all of that information. Steve, visit with us about that just a little bit.
Yeah, eligibility is one of the things that we're responsible for as an organization, and you're responsible for in working with us. So the TAPS database, Rank 1, is offering us an improvement in terms of the way that we can put in our information and then also see what is required. And it kind of slows things down until all the proper paperwork is done, and kind of gives a little bit extra coverage for athletic directors, administrators, registrars, and et cetera. Starting with staff, the first thing you need to do, and make sure this has happened for you, if you're the athletic director, for everyone, make sure that everybody is put in all the jobs that they hold in your department with regards to TAPS. So if they're the fall soccer coach, but also track coach, they need to be entered in both. That needs to be checked. So if you've done multiple things, if you're in one act play and you're also in tennis, we need to see all of that. Make sure all coaches create a profile, complete all the information, make sure that the contact information there is accurate. That is something that we'll be calling for. That's the information we need to connect to people whenever we need it, and we need it then. Also, as you get into the coaches' accounts, you look into the coaches' compliance, you're going to need to complete the professional acknowledgement of rules and complete the scope, and everything just follow through. It flows into what you need to do next, and then when you do everything correctly at the end, you turn green, and everybody knows that you're eligible. If you're not eligible, things stop, and you need to go back and figure out what needs to happen. So that's the beauty and the challenge of this system, is you don't go forward unless you see a green light. Moving forward to the students, every student, and this is different, if you weren't around last year or you did Tapster in the past, the families have to open up an account with Rank 1, and they have to fill out a student profile. And in that, the student acknowledgement of rules, all the medical information, we'll do the medical history, will need to be filled out, and a physical will need to be uploaded. Now, the UIL has waived this requirement of having a physical for this school year. TAPS has not. You are required to have a physical in order to participate. If for some reason, due to COVID and extraordinary circumstances coming forth, you can't get into a doctor, we expect you to get to the doctor. Our requirement, our grace is as soon as you can get a physical, get a physical. In the meantime, you need to get the most recent physical uploaded as a placeholder in Rank 1 so you can move forward, and then replace that once the physical is done. If they have a pre-existing condition, they need clearance, definitely I would not move forward without a physical and a clearance from the doctor if that's concussion, a major injury, etc. Brian?
Just again on the physical form and the medical history, those are there to protect the student, to protect the staff, the coach. So please do your diligence on this one. It may take a little time. We definitely understand in the Valley area getting to a doctor, or even I guess anywhere right now, but we definitely, again, I can't reiterate enough that the physical is there to help you. The medical history must be done regardless of whether the physical is or not, and get that physical as soon as possible. Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
No, and as you move forward with this student profile, and all the forms will be required, and it'll also know what else needs to happen in terms of your transfer, not living with parent. If they're a returning student, they need to update their information. Everything should have rolled over. If they're a new student, whether ninth grader or transfer, they need to open up an account. So make sure that these things are done, follow up, keep the communication going, because you don't want to be held up because paperwork wasn't done or a form wasn't completed. So get that done as soon as possible so you're ready for their questions and then work on through. Student rosters.
All right, thank you, Steve. Another important part of Rank 1 is you need to have a roster for all of your activities. You create your team. In this case, it would be fall soccer. You create that team in Rank 1, and then once you create that team, you can build your roster. You'll have your database of students, and you can pull those over into that roster. You'll notice, if you haven't already, as you pull them over into that roster, if they've completed all of the forms and requirements they have to be eligible in TAPS, and that's kind of done automatically in Rank 1 based on how they answer the questions. It will pull to them and tell them what forms they need, what things they need to sign. If they are green, then they're good to go. They're eligible under our rules. If they're red for any reason, then you can click on that student and it'll tell you what forms are missing. That might be a TAPS form. You might have some local school forms that you require, for instance, for travel or permissions or those kinds of things. And they'll show up red until all those forms that we require at the TAPS level and you might require at the local level are completed.
Yeah, and don't think it's a malfunction. We had a coach do that one year with Tapster, and their student did not show up as eligible, and they go, well, we just thought that was a malfunction in the system. They went ahead and played them, and it became a very big deal. So again, call us if there's a problem. Call us if you think, or contact us if you think there's an issue that you've done all you can do. But again, the communication, and we're here to help, and we're here to answer your questions. So again, give us a call and stay connected to us. Robert?
Thank you, Steve. All right, before we move on, we're going to grab a couple of questions here. Remember, if you have questions, type them in that questions box, and we'll get to them as quick as we can. Brian, here we have one about the game ball. This has happened before. What if we show up for an away game and the home team does not have the official TAPS ball?
In all sports, if that occurs, then the visitor, if they have the official ball, present their balls, and those will be the balls used for the game. So again, we do want the Wilson Forte used if the official ball is not there. So as the host team, you need to have them. If you don't, then the visitor can bring theirs and we will use those. So I don't know that there's a great advantage or disadvantage, to be honest with you, but we are using the same ball. It keeps it consistent throughout the year with what you're going to be using in the championship. So again, if the home team does not have the official ball, then you can press to use the balls that you've brought as the official TAPS ball.
Yeah, if it's a TAPS school. So we can force that on another league, but another TAPS school, that's what we do.
Great. All right, Steve, we got a Rank 1 question. Where do we create the coach profile? How do they do that?
Well, the athletic director, whoever's put in charge, will need to fill out and make sure that they have filled in every person that is in every position. And when they fill that out, then there's a profile that'll be created. And from that, you'll have a login for that coach, and the coach will come into their account that'll have to be made. And inside that account, they'll see all sorts of good stuff, coach's compliance, coach's toolkit, all sorts of things in there once that's open. So we had a question like that yesterday from the volleyball coach. Again, once the head guy is done what they're supposed to do, then the next people can come in and open up their accounts.
All right, let's move on to our next topic, and that's going to be communication. Brian, visit with our listeners about that.
Over the last few years, communication has changed in TAPS. So if you've been here a while and noticing by the poll, many of you have, the opportunity to go to taps.biz still exists. So we're just going to walk through it and hope you understand how we're trying to communicate with you, and then hopefully help us to communicate with you better if these lines aren't reaching you. So the TAPS website is www.taps.biz. You can click on athletics and click on fall soccer. That'll take you to the fall soccer page. And then on that page is the fall soccer blog. So any email that we send out to soccer coaches and fall soccer coaches will also be put on the blog. So you can find it there. Emails, we're going to show emails to the soccer coaches that are shown in rank 1. So again, we're kind of hammering rank 1 today, but if you're not in rank 1 and you're not showing fall soccer, you're probably not going to get the email. May include some information you need. We're probably not sending it just to humor ourselves. We're probably sending it because there is information you need. We can also do a rank 1 push notification. We saw those last year. Basically, you get an email or an update from rank 1 that says you have news, you have a message, and you have to go open your account and look at it. We're going to try to use those in conjunction with the emails, so you'll get either or. And then on social media, TAPS Biz is our main account, but TAPS Twitter is our also there for soccer, so at TAPS Soccer. So as things go on, if you have pictures, if you have things you want to share and share alike across the deal, let's use TAPS Soccer. Make sure you include us in any of your social media followings there. So the website, www.taps.biz, then you're going to click on athletics, then you're going to click on fall soccer. That's where you're going to find the fall soccer info. Right off that www.taps.biz homepage, you'll have our COVID-19 updates. It's the first slide. And then Robert has said, and he'll say again here in a little bit, on the right-hand side of the homepage, you'll also have the latest posts, the latest emails that we've been sending out. So it takes a minute to scroll 10 or 12 through there, but you can definitely gain some valuable information by going there.
All right, thank you, Brian. We're going to kind of transition now. We've talked about eligibility. We've talked about rules. We've talked about schedule and calendar, things you need to know from a TAPS perspective. We're going to kind of begin the transition to some specific things in terms of protocols that obviously all of us have had to think through and research and plan with regard to COVID requirements. So we're going to talk about with some health and safety protocols. But first, Steve, we've got a sponsor coming up.
Yeah, we're excited about a new sponsor, and we're partnering with Reveal Suits, who opened up Reveal Medical, and also with Rank 1 in conjunction to try to get some PPE and some different items there to help you get through this COVID pandemic and the different things that are being demanded and no one budgeted for last year. So hopefully this can give you a product at a price that's good. And again, we'll be offering more of these resources as we move forward. So go ahead, Will.
Hello, my name is Carlton Dixon. I'm the proud founder and CEO of Reveal Medical Incorporated. We're definitely very excited to be partners with TAPS, prestigious schools, well-known schools, awesome institutions, and we're just proud to be affiliated, proud to be a resource of PPE for their students, their staff, parents even. We definitely are excited about aligning ourselves with such a great organization as TAPS. Very familiar with them, growing up in the Dallas area, familiar with a lot of the TAPS schools and being a former athlete and coach. Just very well aware of its reputation. That makes it, all the more worthwhile to be affiliated. We are excited about our offerings of PPE, including but not limited to disposable face masks, KN95 masks, hand sanitizer, gloves, face shields, you name it. If it's in the PPE industry, we are able to supply and provide it. We've been fortunate to provide PPE packages and kit to some of our collegiate partners as well, the Naval Academy and entire Conference USA, which is a partner of ours as well. So we definitely envision providing the same level of service and the same level of product to our TAPS institution. We are able to provide kits customized to how the institutions need particular items. We can package masks and gloves and sanitizer, or we can package gloves, face shields, and thermometers. Very customizable going through us. We also have the ability, and this is kind of a byproduct of what the Reveal brand is about, our ability to customize with officially licensed logos. We do that in our collegiate and professional athletics world on our suit side, and we're able to do that on our PPE side as well. If that was ever a request or a desire for any institution, we can most certainly provide. Please go visit our website, Reveal Medical Inc. That is revealmedicalinc.com. or any of our social media pages at Reveal Medical, and of course at Reveal Suits as well, which is also part of the Reveal brand. And we are, again, just excited to be a part of the TAPS family, and we look forward to working with their awesome institutions.
We thank Reveal Medical. The promo code is TAPS, so whenever you do go in there and they ask for that, that'll get you the special pricing, also get us credit for being one of our schools. And like I said, we appreciate Carlton and his business. If you're a UT Longhorn, he used to be one of the basketball players there, so quite the athlete as well as entrepreneur. We'll move on now. Brian, take us to the next part of our COVID communication.
So as we go through, we spent a lot of time since March developing how we're going to come back to play. And one of the continuing situations that's going to occur is notification of both teams and the officials prior to the contest. So we're going to bounce down one. So required for all contests you host by a member school, that's a tournament, that's a scrimmage or a game. So we understand that if you've got an interscholastic opportunity, we're going to do this pregame communication. So both teams will affirm that they are symptom-free on the morning of the contest, affirm all participants are in compliance with the COVID contact guidelines, and anyone, I said calling lines, but that would be any ball boys. I apologize, it's a carryover from the volleyball, but anybody that would be your ball boy, anybody that's on the field for you as your team is in compliance. And Robert's going to go over that in a little bit after he describes exactly what those guidelines are. We'll go ahead and skip this one, please, and go on down to officials. The officials are also going to do this, so get with your official assigner. Make sure that your official assigner is communicated with you how he's going to communicate that his officials are symptom-free, and then make sure you explain to them that you will be sending them saying both teams. So this is pregame. What we're thinking is 10 o'clock in the morning, you've gotten both groups of kids. So most schools are going to have an affirmation process, a self-screening process before they come to school in the morning. So when you come to school in the morning, make sure that those kids are symptom-free. Question came up yesterday, well, what if they were symptom-free in the morning, but now it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon and they're not symptom-free? Well, the situation would be if you're showing symptoms in the afternoon and there's multiple symptoms there, probably need to do some checking into that before you play them. And that's we're not playing in a bubble. So caution is on our side. I hate for a student to miss a game after showing a lot of symptoms, but the chances are if they're showing these symptoms, even if they don't have COVID, they may have the flu, they may have another situation. So you're checking them in the morning, they're self-affirming, or if you're doing their temperature checks, whatever they be, you're telling the team and the officials of the contest you're getting ready to play that you're good to go.
All right, thank you, Brian. Moving on to the next slide, pregame affirmation. What is it that you're affirming to each other as you prepare to play a contest against a different school? As we've done a lot of research and looked at all the things that are out there, obviously there's a long list of things you can do at your local school level with regard to your students on a day-to-day basis. But what we created and released on last Friday are some general protocols for interaction, scrimmages, games, and tournaments between two schools. And what we would expect at a minimum is that both schools would go through a self-screening process where everybody involved, everybody, the coaches, the staff, the players, managers, team personnel, if you are in a situation where you have school-based officials, like we had yesterday in volleyball, where you have a table crew and line judges and those kind of things. All those people essential to the game should self-screen their COVID-19 before they participate in that game or before they enter a field or an arena where TAPS activities are being conducted. And that self-screening will include, at a minimum, a positive affirmation that everybody involved that's going to participate do not have COVID-19 symptoms. They're not lab confirmed with COVID-19, nor have they had close contact with an individual who is lab confirmed. At this point, Will, let's jump over to the TAPS website and let me show you where this information is. If you haven't seen it already, there are general protocols that we released on last Friday. We're on the home page, and there on the right in light blue, you see that says TAPS in the news. And if you watch that, you'll see it scroll. And in a minute, it's going to scroll to a different topic. And we're going to wait for one more to come up, and it's going to be the nope, go back one, Will. It's going to be TAPS 2020 Return to Action. It's going to roll up next. There are several there. Our most recent posts are always listed there, as Brian mentioned. Those scroll, that one on the top right there. Click on that one, and that will take you to a link, okay? And at the bottom, you see the list of webinars that we're doing right now. In the middle, Fall 2020 Return to Action. Will, if you'll click on that link. That's about an 18-page document, and we don't have to go through all of it, Will, but if you'll just scroll down, go to the very, very last few pages of this, probably 16, 17, 18. This positive affirmation that we're talking about right now, keep going a little farther. We have some sample emails right there. Back up just a little. Right there. Sample communications for our self-screening affirmation. You don't have to use this, but this is just a sample document that we created that you could use school to school on the day of a game, where you're saying, hey, all of our people have self-screened and we're good to go. We don't have any issues. A copy of that self-screening affirmation is restated there. And so those are things you can use. Home team, obviously, you're responsible to coordinate with the officials as well and make sure that everybody, why do we have this? This is to make sure that everybody participating in that contest is stating and affirming, as far as I know, I'm good to go. I don't have any symptoms. I haven't been exposed to anybody. So that there is, as best we can in this environment we're living in, there is some peace of mind that everybody showing up on both sides is affirming that, and then they will move on and play the game as safely as they can. All right, Will, let's bounce on back to our presentation. And continuing on with health and safety, we're going to move to some things. Those are our general things that we published last Friday. We're going to move to some things now that are more specific to fall soccer. And how do these things impact my program? Steve, talk to us about practice protocols.
Practice protocols are up to local control. You need to figure out in your area, in your school, on your campus, with your personnel, how are you going to operate a practice, how you can operate training, skills, and everything else. So it's important that the local control, you figure out what you're going to do and how you're mitigating risk at that level. When it comes to contest, now you're interacting with another school, and that's where TAPS has oversight for at least a minimum standard of what we're going to do. So the rules that we're going to be outlining and what Robert's about to go over is going to apply to all scrimmages, games, and tournaments that you have. Anything that's interscholastic, they need to have the bare minimum of what we're going to be talking about. And Robert, I'll hand it off to you.
All right, thank you, Steve. Looking at your games, what are the protocols? We're going to talk about the playing area. Okay, we're going to talk about the balls. We're going to talk about any pregame meetings with officials, your lineup, any introductions, any of those things you do related to the particular game. And before we pass it on to Brian, who will talk about the playing area, we have this question frequently, and it's addressed in our protocols. This is going to come up potentially. What obligation do I have as a school if I have a positive student in my school, do I have any obligation to my opponents?
The answer to that is we're not requiring that because we govern the extracurricular activities. So TAPS is not going to be able to help you much on that side. We're saying, do you have a positive team member, personnel, or staff that'll be traveling with the team? If you do have positive tests, that would be between you and your school protocol on who you're releasing that to. So every school is going to have a protocol when they come back. Just make sure you follow your protocol accordingly when you get there. The playing area in soccer is pretty easy. It's a big, wide open field. It's got some big nets. It's going to be hot and windy. But the bench area, all we're asking that you do is in keeping with whatever your school protocol is for cleaning benches and et cetera, make sure those are clean. And of course, make sure that as you're social distancing, as you're standing on the sideline, 6 foot apart, if you're on the bench, make sure you use a little distancing. Don't sit elbow to elbow. So just make sure you've got the area at the players area clean and ready to rock and roll. Warm-up balls should be cleaned and disinfected in keeping with school protocols. You can use your own. Official ball for all contests is going to be the TAPS forte. We're recommending a minimum of 6 balls be on hand for the contest. Those balls need to be sanitized prior to you turning them over to the officials to check for ready for play. And then balls need to be sanitized at a minimum at halftime. When a ball goes out of play and it's replaced on the pitch, if you have ball boys or ball girls, they can assist you in that. And then if an official requests it. So I could see where, as a keeper, you're getting a little sweaty, it's hot out there, whatever, the ball gets wet in the process, or other things occur and the official throws the ball out of play, that one definitely needs to be cleaned. So you might have to have that additional personnel or that person that's on the end of the bench and say, hey, today you're the person that gets to sanitize the balls, but that is important. The TASO meetings, they're going to limit it to your captain and to your coach. All people will be socially distanced, so expect that. Be good with your TASO or your TAPS approved official, how they're going to handle the pregame meetings. It's very important right now that we continue having the pregame meeting. So don't skip that step. Don't let them just say, hey, I'm going to walk onto the pitch, I'm going to blow my whistle, and we're ready for play. Make sure you have that pregame meeting. One thing as well with the officials, and to remember, it's not their job to enforce social distancing or mask on the sideline. So just make sure that, if that's your game administrator, that's going to be required to do that. So player introductions, if you're doing them at all, make sure you're social distance, no handshakes or fist bumps with the officials, the opposing coach or team. We discourage player huddles in which they're locked arm in arm or all in one big group bending up. If you can get 2 to 3 feet in between them while you're talking to them, that's great. During the prayer and national anthem, we also look for social distancing. If you're doing a national anthem live, singing is discouraged simply because singing seems to be one in which particle emission comes when you sing. You have a tendency to have water droplets leave your mouth. So I think as far as moving forward, common sense comes into big play here. Soccer's a little easier than a lot of things to socially distance as you come in and out, and we'll go forward from there. Steve?
Yeah, and as we move into the match, you cannot lose your focus on these protocols. Make sure that we go through it in a way where everybody's paying attention. And Robert, talk a little bit about face coverings. We've heard a little bit about that in the news too.
All right, thank you, Steve. This was addressed in general, as we mentioned last Friday, in our general protocols that we released for expectations of our teams when you're hosting a game. And do remember, all these things we're sharing with you, these are our expectations of a TAPS game. If you're hosting a game, you're a TAPS member school, these are the expectations we have for how you would administer these things. If you happen to be playing a school that's not in our organization, they might, as Steve mentioned earlier, have slightly different requirements. Make sure you communicate with those schools and know for you and your fans what the expectations are if you're playing another school that's not a TAPS member school. With regard to face coverings, we're talking about contest personnel, so this would be people on the field, on the sidelines. What's required? If you're a manager, if you're keeping the scorebook, on the bench or on the sideline, if you're an athletic trainer, if you're a player on the bench, okay, then you're expected to have a mask or face covering. What's recommended, and this is based in part on local control, where you're located and things that might be in place for you with your local governance. Coaches, we're recommending you have masks. Players, we're recommending maybe in the pregame and the warm-up, those kind of situations, that might be a good thing. And in the contest, certainly that's a call. It's not required. but it could be recommended for those who are comfortable doing that. Officials, they'll follow their own guidelines. Certainly it's recommended for them, and many of them, depending on who they are, their personal preference. Remember, they may be coming from TASO or a TASO approved chapter, but as we hear frequently, they are independent contractors, so they will come to your facility, and certainly they will be much aware of the things that are expected. With regard to gloves, we have a lot of questions about gloves. That's a part of PPE that's out there now. Certainly would be required for athletic trainers. They're used to that. That's a part of their normal routine. It certainly is permissible, not required, for coaches, managers, players, officials, any of those other people involved in the game. That's something that is permissible, not required, but it is permissible. Brian?
So a quick question. My school is going to require our players to wear masks on the field and at all times of play. Can I require my opponent to do that, Robert, or what's the thought on that?
You cannot. This is one that falls under local control. We're leaving it to our member schools. We mentioned earlier, you'll hear that many times throughout this season. Local control is going to dictate what your school decides is in the best interest of your particular students and players if they're participating in a game. What we published last Friday and what we're publishing for you today are the minimum requirements that TAPS would expect at a TAPS hosted event. But if you are more restrictive, you cannot impose that on your opponent.
Kind of moving on to uniform allowances. We've had this in the championships when it gets cold or whatever, but they may also decide to do it for COVID. I sure wouldn't do it with it's 106 degrees outside, but they are allowed to, players are allowed to wear long sleeves, long pants, and undergarments. Just remember, if it's an undergarment, must be the single color, the dominant color on the uniform top. So long sleeves, long pants are allowed. Especially as we get closer. In the last couple of years, it's been a little chilly down at the state championship. So that's not just a COVID opportunity. That's the opportunity when it gets chilly outside as well. We're going to skip the next one, Will, and go just leave game balls. We've hit that enough. Wilson, Forte. Probably can't say it enough, but we're going to keep doing it. So, Steve, talk to us about the rest of sanitizing their hands, et cetera.
Wash your hands. No, sanitize, sanitize, sanitize. And there'll be a lot of opportunities as you come on and off the bench, substitutions at half times, to make sure that you have those hand sanitizers there. Again, we've been hearing it, but again, we do need to operate that way in our extracurricular activities as well as during the school day. So make sure that the players, the coaches have access to this, and they need to be very, they need to be serious about this. And if they'll stay on it and we all do it, we will get some good results. Moving on to post-match, needs to look a little differently as well. Robert?
Thank you, Steve. As we mentioned yesterday in our first webinar in volleyball, there's nothing about this season that's going to look traditional or normal for most of our coaches and players as we move through. That's okay. We're just trying to take as many variables out of the equation as we can. So we're encouraging, as Steve mentioned, everybody to be very diligent about staying on top of these particular issues. Pre-match and post-match, when you're coming and going, that's a time where you should be wearing a face mask. That's a time where you should be practicing social distancing. We're not going to allow in any of our activities this year any post-game physical interaction between the teams. No handshakes, no any of those kind of activities. Certainly the teams could discuss ahead of time, making sure how they handle that. Coaches, your players are used to doing that. They've done it their whole life growing up. We know in every sport there's traditions and things you do showing sportsmanship and appreciation for a good match that this year we're just going to have to be careful not to let that habit creep in there and stay away from those kind of activities. Observe social distancing when you can, leaving the bench area, gathering all your equipment, going back to your bus or particular mode of travel. Just remember that Brian mentioned this yesterday, the word optics, how it appears to other people is very important. People have differing opinions about what's going on in the world, but as much as we can, have these protocols in place and follow those very diligently and be very much aware of how it appears to those who are there interacting or watching the game. Brian?
Just had a quick question here, and following that up, we're requiring players to wear a mask who have just come off the field. Once they've come off the field, they cool down and they go to sit down, then yes, if they're sitting on the bench or if they come off and they're not going right back on, then they would need to wear their mask. If they're going to go back, you're simply getting a drink. You're going to have them jog around a little bit. When they're warming up, cooling down, they don't have to wear a mask. However, having watched an awful lot of fall soccer over the years and soccer in general, there's usually some of those players on the bench that have no opportunity to get into the contest. Those definitely need to have the bench. So warming up and cooling down would not be necessary. Inside and outside, mask usage is still going to be required. The word optics continues to come up. You're at your school level, you're trying to social distance as much as possible. On the field, on the courts, and whatever, we're also going to social distance as best as possible. So again, we're requiring it. I know there's 14 to 18-year-old students. They may or may not social distance as well, but that's where the opportunity to coach them back up will occur.
Yeah, we continue manage risk where you can. Again, and moving on to travel, that's up to local control. We're not telling you how big your bus needs to be or whether you need a carpool or whatever else, but we do encourage you to have protocols in place, to have a plan in place as you go there, and just be aware of that. Fans, this has come up. We do have some things on the website, taps.biz, and what Robert had just referenced, Taps in the News, the return to action. We have some bare minimum standards, but it's very, very important that we treat both sides the same way. Robert?
Yeah, Steve, the document we jumped to earlier, we won't do that again right now, but a reference here where you can find that. Remember, go to the TAPS website, TAPS in the News, TAPS 2020 Return to Action. On page 14 of that document, there's a whole page of guidelines and protocols for you if you're hosting a TAPS event, what the expectations are, and then if you're the visiting school, knowing that those are the minimum standards and guidelines that we recommend, what you can expect. So when it comes to fans, we have a lot of those details there. Some of you have restrictions on what capacity of fans that you could have based on your local rules. We understand that. So we've given some very general overarching guidelines for what the expectations are if fans are allowed in your particular area and what those limits might be.
And also, this is also important during your district executive committee meetings and making sure that y'all come to some agreements. And again, it's not going to be, well, we just have room for our fans. You guys will have to wait outside. We need to make sure that we have consideration for our guests as we go forward. And again, work this through. Same can be said for auxiliary groups. And we do get those at fall soccer every once in a while. Band and drumline, cheerleaders, dance team. Are they going to be allowed? What is going to be the protocol? Where will they be? So make sure that you're communicating if you're going to bring somebody, and don't just show up with them. And also ask permission before you bring your band. They might turn them away at the door. So again, communication, pre-match communication is very important. District meetings are very important in communication that everybody has an agreement on what they're going to do. And again, know that the host can only do what they can do. So that consideration. And again, we're going to work together and we're going to show the rest of the world how it should be done. Moving on to playoffs, and let me hand it off to Brian.
Playoffs, as our present plan would be the area game, the by-district game, if they're necessary, would be at the higher seed. So again, from a COVID protocol, it's going to be that host school. So make sure as the host, if you're renting a field or if you're at your own field, make sure you make sure that your opponent who's arriving knows what your protocols are going to be. The regional content round right now is a neutral site. So when you go to neutral site, you do have to be concerned with what their playoff protocols are and what they have for their fields as they come in. So make sure that if you are negotiating a neutral site that is not your own, you contact them, find out what their protocols are. If the neutral site host is more restrictive than your schools, then you will need to bow to their experience because it's their facility. They may also say how many people can be in the bench, whether auxiliary groups can be down on the field. A big question this year from the folks that we're trying to host facilities with and that we're trying to lease facilities with is, will their locker rooms be available? You know, once you leave, their kids have to go back into that locker room. So some are saying you can use the gym or the field, but we're not going to be allowing you to come in and use the locker room for anything else but a bathroom. So the farther out you go, the more you want them to take a shower before they get in the van, but make sure that we understand that as we go and the self-screening of both the local folks too. If you've got an announcer and a clock keeper there, make sure that they're telling you they're self-screened in case you have to go back up into the box. So playoffs, the higher seed will host, and that will follow the higher seed rules where they are. And if you go neutral site, the neutral site rules, or the host or the visitor as their most restrictive. But I do think we're going to have some leeway here. You take care of your school in the playoffs, they take care of theirs, and we hope that somewhere in the middle is where we'll find that sweet spot. Robert?
All right, thank you, Brian. Moving on to our championships, some considerations to be thinking about. Obviously, we'll get you more information as we move closer to those dates. We will be live streaming all our contests, all our championships, our Final Four and championship games like we have in the past. That might be a lot more important this year, given people's maybe inability or reluctance to travel and attend the game in person. So that's something that will be available. Limited attendance is a possibility. We hope that won't be an issue for our fall soccer crowds at our Final Four and championships, but we do have to be aware that there are some restrictions in place that might affect that. We're going to allow a longer time between the contests. We're going to allow enough time to get the teams on, play the game, move them off the field, off the playing area, get all the fans out, bring the next group of teams and fans in. So we'll get that schedule to you as we move closer to that time. But we are aware that there are a lot of things we're going to have to do in hosting our championships to have a great schedule we can depend on, but allow that time that's going to be necessary in between the games to get the teams and fans in safely. Locker rooms, as Brian mentioned, come dressed to play. The likelihood that we'll have locker rooms in some of our places is probably not going to be an option, but we will let you know that as we move closer to that. So you'll know before you come to the Final Four of the championship exactly what access you have and what those expectations and limitations will be. And we will, as I mentioned, be sanitizing between the contest benches, pre and post game. And then we'll have information for you about how we'll handle introductions. We'll certainly do that. We want to honor our coaches and students who have achieved those things and accomplishments throughout the year with regard to introductions and awards, but there will be a slightly different protocol for that, and we'll be getting that information to you. Steve?
Yeah, and TAPS TV, which has been an outstanding thing for TAPS, and again, getting better every year, and something that we really appreciated, and we heard a lot of appreciation from our fall soccer folks with the Final Four coverage that we had, and we'll do that again. But that's Blue Frame Technologies, who we partner with, and Blue Frame this year, right on time, has come on with some special deals for our schools, and as we go through this, and so you'll be able to experience these contests and the excitement live. So listen to what Mark Krug and the folks at Blue Frame Technologies have for TAPS schools this year.
Mark Krug, I'm the Director of Partnerships at Blue Frame Technology. I think Blue Frame is special because it provides an end-to-end solution for video streaming, starting with our production truck software and all the way through our streaming platform and the way that we can deliver our clients' content to the modern platforms that people are using through web, mobile, and smart TV devices. Well, the Blue Frame and TAPS partnership is really special to us because we provide the whole streaming platform for TAPS TV, which is the official digital network of the TAPS organization. So not only is that the place where all of the state championships get profiled, but it's a great avenue for any member school of TAPS to be able to have a very prominent presence for their athletic and event broadcasts. We understand the high school space. We have valued our software and our streaming solution at a price point that really fits into the TAPS budget. So at just $1,000, you can stream all of your events for the entire academic year, not only to your website, but to the TAPS TV network. We greatly value our partnership with TAPS. We're looking forward to another great year and continuing to build on the TAPS TV momentum and success. And we invite any school that's looking for a change in their video streaming service to obviously give us a first look and become part of the TAPS TV platform.
And we thank our partner, Blue Frame Technologies. And now Brian's going to do something that most of us as educators have done our whole life, and he's going to answer a whole lot of what if questions. What if, what if, what if? Well, Brian, tell us what if.
I think we'll answer what we can. So if a team cannot play, whether it's a district contest or a non-district contest, but we'll start with a non-district, we're just going to wipe it off the schedule and keep going. We're not going to try to reschedule if we don't have to. If a district opponent, based on COVID or COVID situation, their numbers fall short and they can't play a district contest, that's not going to eliminate them from the playoffs. So if you can make it up, obviously we would like you to make it up. However, the later we get in the season, based on weather and based on other concerns, if it can't be made up and it's a COVID-related situation or health, we would definitely understand. So again, if it's COVID and the virus causes you to not be able to travel or them to travel to you, the only thing we're saying is please notify as soon as possible so that we can be a little bit prepared. We know what's coming our way and we can go forward. Once we get to the playoffs, this has happened to us before in a couple of other situations. So if the playoffs are just beginning and a team opts out, obviously in that first round, we could create a bye or we could create a different matchup if possible. However, going into the second, third rounds, as we get into the playoffs, they would have already beat somebody to get there. So if it happens where a team has to bow out because of COVID or COVID concerns, we would probably look to replace that team with the team they beat in the previous round where possible. If that's not possible, we would look at a bye or a reshuffle. One of the things that we're looking at as we go to the championships, those of you and kind of on the survey show that have been here a while, several years ago, we did do the regional and the Final Four all the same week. We did it in 3 days at Audi International, if you've been around. So we played the 4 regional games, and then we played winners and losers to get to our 2 games at the end for the championship and the 3rd place. So it became a 10-game tournament. It's cost prohibitive in some ways, especially with the cost of the officials right now, but we are looking at that. We're a team to make the Final Four, and then they couldn't play. Again, we would go back to their previous opponent, see if they could. If they can't, then we might look at doing a round robin of the 3 teams that did make it. But understand, I've killed a lot of trees with what ifs. I have a note card for each what if. It goes on the floor once we work it through. And so we will, go forward the best we can once we get there. As we move forward with COVID, and it's just an awful hard situation to predict, if we were to do the regional and the Final Four together on the 11th, 12th, and 13th, that would obviously give us an extra playing date or 2 to get the regular season in. So I know our folks in the Valley are going to start later. The majority of them are. You may be starting late up here. It would give us a chance to get a couple of extra games in or get a couple of warm-up opportunities in. So as we get ready to go, we're going to encourage you to ask questions. We're here to help. Our contact information, if you can't find it, at www.taps.biz. If you don't see it on the Taps Biz Twitter and Facebook accounts, give us a holler here at the Taps office, 254-947-9268. And as always, we'll try to field your questions at info@taps.biz, info@taps.biz. Highly encourage, if you're struggling with rank 1, if you have problems with score stream, give us a call. Kelly and Rhonda here in the office are more than willing, and they're ready and waiting to help. We look forward to moving forward as we go. We look ready to get to play. I mean, I'm looking forward to September 7th. I'm looking forward to the opportunities as long as the COVID-19 metrics allow. So I'm going to give one last check here to the questions. I don't see any new ones having been added. So again, thank you for joining us here today, and we're ready for TAPS Fall Soccer 2020. Thank you for joining us. John, finish this up.
Thank you, Brian, and thanks everybody in the office. Well, you heard it, folks. That's it for us today. If you have any questions, please send them to us, info@taps.biz. I've got 2 handouts for you if you want them. One of them is a certificate for continuing education hours. If your school likes that kind of thing on record, we've got that for you. And we've also got a flyer from Blue Frame about their pricing options, including their zero price option, zero cost up front. I'm going to leave the webinar open for a few minutes for people to download those. If you just click on the little handouts drop down and click on each of those PDFs, it will open in your browser and you can download it from there. Remember, you're going to get an email tomorrow with a link to this recording on YouTube. And I'm also going to have a link to these handouts in the description of that YouTube link. But if you can't get anything, if you can't find something, or if you need another question, please let us know. But remember, that email with the recording and handouts is coming tomorrow. And you folks, please enjoy the rest of your day.